Well, it's been a rather tumultuous handful of weeks, but we're looking forward to update 1.1 and beyond because sometime in early April, Warhammer 3 will be getting its first major balance pass. So we're chilling, got some H2O, got some snacks. We're going to go through these patch notes line by line, breaking it down, discussing what we like, what we don't like, some of the changes I'd like to see moving forward, and the general state of this capstone game of the trilogy, and then maybe look into the future as well. If you're wondering why I haven't been uploading as much over the last couple weeks, just know I've put 240 hours into Warhammer 3 in the span of about 2 months, which for me is a lot. And I want to make sure that I don't burn out before we hit something really important. I don't want to hit a wall right before a major DLC or right before a major update like this one. So I put a ton of time into the game already. I worked really hard in those first month and a half, 2 months of release. Wanted to take a little bit of time off and recharge my batteries and then jump back on the pony, which I think we'll start with this video. Get back to that regularly scheduled content. So on to the forward of these patch notes, and the basic gist of it here is that with the Blood Pack, DLC, any future content, they don't really want to talk about that until the base game has been fixed up to some extent. What that extent will be, not exactly sure, although the patch notes give us a general idea of where they're headed with the future of Realms of Chaos and the rest of this campaign. I think this is, generally speaking, a pretty good idea. If people are pissed off, they're not happy with the base product, why the hell would you be focusing on future paid DLC and content? They're still working on that on the back end, of course, but they're not going to come out and say publicly, yo, look at all these crazy cool things you can buy real soon, when the actual Warhammer 3 base game just isn't where people want it to be. So I think that's probably solid PR, if nothing else. Make sure that you just don't want to bring up that kind of stuff. Like, hey, you could pay $10 more to get this game fixed up nice and proper. Yeah, probably not the best idea. So good on them for that anyway. And in terms of the preview itself, obviously there are going to be balance changes. There are going to be a lot of fixes to the Realms of Chaos, and I think that's where we'll start, because this is really the core, the crux of everyone's main issues with Warhammer 3 as it stands currently. So they're hitting a lot of the core points here. The strength of the negative realm traits have been reduced by roughly 50%, so they won't be quite so crippling. Demonic legendary lords will no longer be burdened by the negative traits of their respective patron god. That also makes sense. It actually, from a lore perspective, someone like Scarbrand being cursed by Khorne does make a little bit of sense, considering he is the exile. So should he return, Khorne probably wouldn't be too happy about that, but I don't think we need to go on that by a case-by-case basis. If they wanted to, that would be a nice little flavor touch. I don't think it's important for the core gameplay mechanics of this campaign, so not too worried about that. I think it's nice that if you're Kugath Plaguefather returning to your home domain, yeah, you probably should not be negatively affected by visiting the realm of Nurgle, considering you are the biggest dickus in that realm. Traits gained in the Realm of Chaos will now be removed when a legendary lord completes a survival battle within that realm. So once you've finished up your quest inside that specific part of the Ruinous Pantheon, well, then the negative trait will go away. Also makes some sense. You've essentially defeated their greatest demonic champion. You stole their soul. Makes sense that you would purge yourself of their chaotic influence to an extent. And one of the core things that it's so frustrating. Anytime you go there, you then have to come back to the normal realms and spend, 4, 5, 6 turns convalescing, basically relying on RNG to get rid of whatever negative trait you had. That was always very frustrating, and it slowed down the campaign quite dramatically and led to a situation where your top legendary lord is spending obscene amounts of time not expanding your empire or doing fun things. It is not entertaining to have Miao Ying forced to go back to Nangao and just sit there doing nothing. So, good change on that front as well. When a player intercepts an AI lord at the Forge of Souls, their souls will now be lost, forcing them to restart their collection, which should make it easier to disrupt the Souls race. Hell yes. That's a huge one, because, and I'm sure many of you guys have had experienced this so far, if a enemy lord gets ahead of you in the Souls race, it can be almost impossible to catch up in some circumstances, and you had no way to prevent them from winning the campaign and ending your play session unless you just sat in the Forge of Souls for 20, 30, 40, 50 turns. Maybe sometimes for the rest of the campaign. That is, again, another situation where if you're playing as Boris, you're suddenly spending all of your playtime with your favorite lord, the one you started your campaign with, running errands, doing things you'd really rather not be doing, not actually getting to use them. Sitting there in the Forge of Souls was not an interactive mechanic, so now you only have to do that the one time, maybe wait 5-10 turns for him to show up, but once you have killed that enemy lord, they lose all their souls, they're reset, and that should make the whole thing a lot more interactive and honestly a lot more like the Great Vortex, which again wasn't exactly beloved by the community, but anything we can do to shift the pendulum more towards Great Vortex I think is a good thing, because generally speaking I think it's just a better experience than Realms of Chaos in its current form. The protection building chain can now be used to prevent rifts from spawning in the province in which they are built. So if you want to purge your kingdom of chaotic influence, make sure a demonic horde doesn't crawl its way out of your butthole. You can now do that. I think that gives players more tactical options when it comes to the economic, financial, defensive side of their empire building. If you want to care a little bit less about making money and care more about just protecting the inner core of your kingdom, now you can do that. And if you build a protection building, there won't be any demons spawning in there. And that'll also help with the agent spam too, which, I mean, some of those agents will show up 2 or 3 turns into the rift appearing. So that gets very problematic when you've got 18, 20 agents in the heart of your empire, all spreading chaos corruption, all trying to kill your heroes and lords and do all that stuff. It gets very obnoxious. So good change there as well. And the rewards for gaining souls have been improved by providing additional bonuses for a limited period of time. This was another core problem with the Realms of Chaos experience. You're not really encouraged to go to Khorne's Domain or Tzeentch's Realm. You didn't really get any benefit for doing so. It was pretty much just punishment, punishment, punishment. And I think that's really a big part of people's frustrations with Realms of Chaos, is that there aren't a lot of things that encourage you to do things. You're basically just whipped. It's all just punishment. You're being punished for not doing things rather than being rewarded for engaging in the core experience. And obviously that's a design problem that CA has had to come to grips with, and it's a big reason why Total War Warhammer 3 is sitting at a mixed review rating on Steam at the moment. Okay, the supply lines bug has been fixed as well. Huge. I mean, that has invariably ruined plenty of playthroughs. Imagine a situation where you need to defend your capital from an encroaching demonic horde. And remember that rifts can spawn demonic hordes in the middle of your empire. You can't afford to bring Boris, whoever your legendary lord is, back, because they're probably off gallivanting in the Chaos Realms. And then you recruit a lord, you get an army, you kill off whatever invasion force has showed up, and then you disband them, and you still have the upkeep penalty. I mean, that's campaign ruining shit right there. That's a huge problem. Good to see that addressed in this first patch. A lot of people would have been pissed if it wasn't. One thing that I noticed was not addressed in this patch, though, it doesn't seem like anyway, and remember, this is more like just the overview. It's not the actual individual patch notes. It's more just an idea of what's coming. But I haven't seen anything in regards to auto-resolve, which personally for me is one of my bigger bugbears with this whole thing. It's like, auto-resolve sucks. It's always sucked in Total War. That's not a new thing, but it seems especially egregious in Warhammer 3, and it does not feel good to have to fight, especially in this game with how many minor summit battles there are, the sieges that are typically much more grindy than your typical quick land battle in Warhammer 2. It's a huge issue that I'm forced to fight a bunch of battles that should be easy auto-resolves. And I do not want a situation where my elemental ice bear or artillery is just getting outright destroyed by crap tier garrisons. Feels horrible. I like fighting battles in Total War, but I don't want my time wasted either, and I don't see anything about auto-resolve here. So I'm hoping that maybe that's something they forgot to include in this top-down overview. Maybe it won't be addressed in this patch. It needs to be addressed quickly, though, because it's just it's a frustrating experience, and I think that is the core of what CA needs to focus on with all these updates in the early stages of this life cycle, is tone down the frustration, tone down the punishment, tone down the penalties, not in a way that it gets rid of the strategy, tactics, or those kind of elements, but there's just so much that doesn't feel like it belongs in the game, and it's just like, I don't want you to play, I just want to make you mad. So that's kind of where I'm at on that front at the moment. Another big topic is infantry responsiveness. So compared to Warhammer 2, Warhammer 3 range units specifically, but really any infantry, and Zerkovich did a great breakdown of all the problems on this front, but they do not feel responsive. I can give them a command, a movement order, and it will sometimes take 4 to 5 seconds for them to actually respond and start doing what I told them to do. That may be a realistic look at how battlefields functioned in the 1700s, but nowadays, in a video game, doesn't feel very great. And obviously there are lots of differences between real life and, you know, a strategy game like Warhammer 3. So I don't want 15, 20 seconds from my movement order, raise them on, raise the banner, raise the flag, for them to get their asses moving, especially in a game with Pendulum that can one-shot infantry. I need to immediately move. I need them to be snappy and Johnny on the spot, on the ball, when I tell a unit to do something, and right now they don't. Get your asses moving, dude. If I tell you to go somewhere, go, and go quickly. If I literally can't dodge Pendulum by giving a movement order on the millisecond it was cast, you know there's an issue there, and I mean, it's lost me battles. It's lost plenty of people in early access battles. It's not a good feeling. So, infantry responsiveness, I don't know exactly the core problems here. I just know they are not responding in the way they should be, and hopefully this will address some of those problems. Okay, looking at general balance right now, I would say that this chart with domination mode is pretty much what people would have expected based on the battles they've seen on YouTube and tournaments and all that stuff. The general consensus from YouTubers, tournament runners, content creators on the strengths and weaknesses of each faction. Now remember, domination is very different than land battle, and we don't have land battle stats here, so some of these factions that maybe perform quite poorly in domination are actually quite decent in land battles. I think Cathay is a great example. They have a very low win rate in domination mode at only 33%, but in land battles, it would not surprise me if that's more like 50 or 53 or something. It would be quite a bit higher regardless. So one of the important things to note when we're looking at this here is that some of the factions that were considered weak, quote, I'm using quotations, air quotes there, you can't see me, but that's what I'm doing. Just because they're considered weak in a tournament situation doesn't necessarily mean they're weak in the hands of the average player. And I think Nurgle is a great example of that. So they have a 51% win rate in domination mode, although they're considered one of the weaker factions in multiplayer currently. The reason for that is because their playstyle is quite simple, quite straightforward, and especially in a game mode like Domination, they can use their tankiness, their mass, to just sit on a point, then they can be pretty strong. I mean, you blob up with Nurgle, heal it with Fleshy Abundance, and that can be a tough nut to crack. So I think part of that is being inflated by Domination mode itself. People who maybe aren't quite as experienced at outflanking them, at going to all the points and spreading their micro across the entire field. They take one big fight with Nurgle, get their ass kicked, and the game's over. Might explain why they have a higher win rate here. And a tournament player will always be able to exploit a faction's weaknesses better than a casual. So in a tournament situation, Nurgle, considered one of the weaker factions, in regular pub play, they seem to be doing quite well. Although, interestingly enough, I mean, there are 5 factions that are over 50%, well over 50%, and 2 of them are super, super low. And it kind of makes sense here. Both Kislev and Cathay are very much reliant on combined arms. They require quite a bit more micro than a faction like Khorne, who can just run into melee and be expected to win the majority of the time. So even though Kislev can match up pretty decently against the Khornate forces, from a competitive standpoint anyway, you got the Barriots, you've got good micro, you spread the field, you can mess them up pretty bad. It's a lot harder for someone who maybe doesn't have as much experience to handle that onrushing horde, and that is reflected in the stats here. In tournament play, Kislev considered quite good right now, being carried maybe a little bit by their Ice Bear chariots, but still a good faction. But those hybrid combined arms, iron micro intensive factions, a lot harder for the average person to play with, and that's reflected in Grand Cathay as well, who are reliant on the harmony mechanic, which they can't really utilize in domination mode, and that was maybe a bit overlooked. I think there will need to be some harmony changes if they want to see this number go up, because you can't create a cohesive, strong formation in domination mode with your starting funds being as low as they are and reinforcements trickling in. Like, their biggest strength is a straight up weakness in domination. In land battle, not so much. They can create those cohesive formations. They can be quite strong there, but here, spreading the field, they're just not particularly good in that way at all. So, not unsurprisingly, Tzeentch and Ogre Kingdoms are at the top of the leaderboard. Slaanesh is actually higher than I thought they would be, to be honest. 55% is pretty high for such a micro-intensive glass cannon-y faction. But Tzeentch and Ogres do not surprise me. They have some overperforming stuff, which I guess we can talk about a little bit here. So, I mean, you guys know the basics, right? In general, overperforming heavily in both ranked matchmaking and tournaments. We are making significant adjustments to the units based on community feedback and our metrics. Now, there's a lot of important things to discuss on this front. Iron Blasters and Gorgers, I think the general consensus is that they are overtuned at the moment. Gorgers, for example, have just crazy AP split. You've seen me break them down. Now, a lot of people say, yo, we should just increase the cost of Gorgers, right? Like, if they're performing so well, let's just make them more elite, because Ogres need them. Let's make them 1800, whatever. There are a couple ways CA could balance a unit like Gorgers. One of them is just reduce model count, which would actually make sense for the next point I'm going to talk about. The general thing that happened on tabletop was that Gorgers did have amazing stats. They were kind of considered unelite. They hit super hard, what have you. The difference with them is that they came in units of 1, from my understanding, and they'd be used to like hunt artillery or a certain character, use their vanguard, use their stock, get up on top of someone, rip them up, use their unbreakable. Even if they got surrounded, they'd fight to the death, kill off something, and then, okay, great. You've killed your high-value target. It was a one-shot suicide, take out their lord, easy game. That's not true in Warhammer 2, and personally, I think Ogres are in need of a strong AP unit in that tier 3 slot, but they don't need to be as strong as they are. They don't need to be taking on Skull Crushers and Bear Cav in a straight-up fight and winning. Again, that is not their role. That is not how they've been designed or balanced at all. So, yes, you could improve or increase their price, but I don't think that's the right call here. I like them at 1100 or 1200. Just reduce their model count so they have less HP, so they're not quite so tanky. In my opinion, they're supposed to be a glass cannon. You send them in, they can shred lots of stuff, but they'll die really quickly. And right now, they are not dying fast because they have enough models to take on Bear Cav in a frontal charge, which are bonus versus large. They're designed to hard counter them, and they can still win in that fight, or at least trade very cost effectively. So that's a change I'd like to see there. For Iron Blasters, they're using Sky Titan tech, really powerful arcane cannons, but they're able to one-shot you basically across the map, right? Like crazy, hyper-accurate, destroy single entities. They have a split shot at the moment, and I think that's fine. What I'd like to see from them is maybe more of a spread on their shot. If you're firing 5 projectiles, all of them probably should not be hitting from max range. Even dwarf cannons aren't able to do that. They'll usually miss 1 or 2 cannonballs from across the map. With the Iron Blaster, usually 4 or 5 of the 5 projectiles will hit, and it will devastate all the Gooder Demons and a lot of these units that are very high value and very big hitbox. So just increase the spread on it so that it can't snipe you from literally across the map. If you are going to get those devastating volleys off, it needs to be closer. The Sky Titans might have been hyper accurate with their artillery. I imagine a dumbass ogre rolling around on it would probably not be quite as accurate. It's a bit disconcerting to see such an accurate artillery piece from such long range from a faction that should have tons of firepower, but maybe shouldn't be quite so precise in their movements. So more spread on that I think would be a good change for that unit. For Grand Cathay, they are underperforming, as we said. I don't know what to do with them in domination mode because their core mechanic just can't be utilized very well in that mode. So I'll be interested to see what they decide to do. Obviously, this faction will become much better with the DLC. That's how it always is. I think with a Warhound unit an AP Warhound unit, not Warhound, Monstrous Beast, like Fleshhounds of Khorne, maybe give them Jade Lions. That would help them out a ton because right now their cavalry sucks. You can spam Peasant Horsemen and that can do something for you. Even Jade Lancers can be okay. Longbow Riders at 1600 are just super expensive, so even though they perform all right, typically you're not going to want to rely on them too heavily. I think having something in the 700, 750 range with good AP, good weapon strength, that's fast, that can hunt down archers, and basically make an enemy faction respect your mobility would be really good for them. And I think that's what Jade Lions will offer. So I expect to see them in DLC. I don't know that Monkey Warriors will do a whole lot as infantry for them, but that is probably the core infantry unit I'd expect to see in DLC as well moving forward. Kislev, they're not doing particularly well. They have a pretty low win rate, but I think they're fine. Their Bariots are going to get nerfed. There's no question about that. They are overperforming at their price point at 900. The split between them at 900 and the heavy war sleds at 1300 just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So they'll probably get a price increase. And if there are unit balance changes, this is an important point to make here, I feel. And I just see it on Reddit and the forums so often. People blaming other parts of the community for balance changes that they don't like. And the reality is, number one, single player and multiplayer both. Most MP guys also play single player, so they care about single player, they enjoy single player, they don't want to see that ruined either. If people are saying, in a vacuum, which is the most logical way to balance any strategy game, period, is in custom battle or multiplayer, where everything is even, there's no red trees, there's none of those confounding variables like legendary lord buffs or anything like that. In a vacuum, their base stats, their base performance, if a unit is overperforming there and people suggest, hey, this unit needs to get changed, it needs to get buffed, it needs to get nerfed, whatever, it's up to creative assembly to figure out how to balance that unit appropriately. If people say, okay, Ancient Salamander started out a little bit too strong, it should have a slight nerf to whatever. That's a suggestion. CA should take that on board, think about that, but if they go overboard with those changes and successfully nerf it 4 or 5 times in a row, which literally nobody asked for, that's on CA. So getting mad at people for saying like, yo, this unit needs to get changed a little bit, it really doesn't benefit us in any way. What we should be asking for is CA to use a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, when they are changing something. Whether it be an improvement, whether it be a reduction in a unit's performance. No one wants to see a unit be bad in campaign or multiplayer. Nobody wants to see a unit never get used. In campaign, a tool that CA really have not used to its fullest potential are those red skill lines, are those legendary lord buffs, especially in Warhammer 3, those tech trees. A lot of them are very underwhelming right now. If a unit needs to get changed so that it makes more sense at its price point, or so that it isn't just crushing everything in a straight up fight like Gorgers, they can make that change, but then give Scrag more ways to improve his Gorgers to make up for whatever's lost. There are tons of ways to improve that unit in campaign for Scrag specifically, or for any other unit. Rhesus, if he has some Sky Titan technology, improve his Iron Blasters that way. Plenty of tools there that have not been used to their fullest potential. I think that's annoying because we don't want situations where units become useless. And for those useless units, we want them to get buffed as well, right? Whether you're a multiplayer guy or single player guy. Everybody wants to see every single unit in a roster be useful in some capacity. So getting mad at someone for saying, hey, this unit might need some changes is really not particularly logical. It's up to CA to make the units fun, balanced, entertaining, and strategic. And I think that is one thing that's kind of been lost with the whole Warhammer series in general, is a lot of people are kind of looking for the power fantasy, which is fine, but at its core, this is a strategy game. Units should be strategic, If they just beat everything you throw them into, then that's not very strategic. It's not how tabletop works. It's not how lore works. Reflecting lore is cool, but it's still about tactics. It's still about strategy. You should have to think. There has to be a cerebral element. And I think some people kind of have a warped, skewed perception on that. So that's my thinking on some of the balance changes so far. Ooh, this is a big one. So there are several issues with charges, bracing, and impact damage. They feel it's too risky to touch these Slaanesh units, like the Seeker Chariots, without having a good understanding of what effect those will have, but those are being fixed, and then depending on how those units perform after those changes, we will know. But the current issue is that Slaaneshi Chariots, the Seeker Chariots, the Hellflayers, do almost no damage on the charge. You can get a gorgeous flank or rear charge with their devastating flanker passive. You can run through the entire formation, bowling over dozens of units, and then they lose like 100 HP. It's comical and super underwhelming. I don't know the core problem, exactly what the issue is. I just know that if I charge into the flank with a Hellflayer, it should devastate troops, and at the moment it does not. So impact damage is getting changed. They'll monitor the performance of these units after that change and then decide what to do. But I love this because, one, it's not just for Slaanesh, it should be for a lot of the other chariots as well. But it'll be nice, and not just chariots, it should also be for cavalry too. Heavy cav, knights charge in to the flank or rear of a unit. I want to see that unit get devastated, if it's the kind of unit they can devastate. And at the moment, that's just not what happens. So I am looking forward to that change. I wouldn't be surprised if something else breaks in the meantime, but we'll see. There's nothing more disappointing than getting an Exalted Seeker into a great flanking position, charge in from the side, and just do literally nothing to the enemy unit. And I've had some very funny examples, like in a Nurgle game, Nurgle vs. Slaanesh game I played recently with Romulan Dog. He went up the center with his Seekers, charged into my Nurglings, and just you saw dozens of them just go flying like 30, 40 feet, and they lost like no HP. You're just like, bruh, why does this unit even exist if that's what they're able to do? So, yeah, good change there. Hopefully, we don't know exactly what it'll entail, but on paper, it looks nice. Gift of Slaanesh. This one was pointed out by, I think, first a reviewer of the game, like someone for IGN or something, like one of the gaming publications, I think. And then I think Legend kind of showcased it afterwards. This was bad, so I'm glad that's getting changed. The tech will be resolved, so it doesn't cause those problems. Alt-tab crash. I've not personally had this myself because I play in borderless, and I think I've crashed twice since pre-release. So I have not really had crashing issues with Warhammer 3, but I know some people have, and stability issues on any game are very frustrating, so feels bad if that's been something you're dealing with, and hopefully last patch and this one will further improve all those problems. The assembly kit and the mod workshop are coming alongside update 1.1 in early April. Makes me very excited. Modding has always been a huge part of this channel. I cover mods all the time. I love them. They're a great way to supplement any Total War game, improve them, and show some facets that maybe you haven't seen before. And it's a great way to keep me refreshed as well, because if I start getting bored of vanilla, then I can start playing an overhaul like SFO or use some of those legendary Lord mods by Mixu, what have you. I don't know exactly what the deal is, but I've heard rumors of the ability for people to play as factions from Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 in Warhammer 3. But it'd be so sick if people found out a way to add those races to custom and multiplayer, and we started getting modding games going before Mortal Empires comes, where we can just play any faction from Warhammer 1, Warhammer 2, and Warhammer 3. That would be a huge boon to my content, specifically to Turns, to anyone who's on the multiplayer side. Obviously, modders will not be able to add those factions into campaign. I don't think that's even possible, but and give them like star positions and all that. I think that'd just be an obscene amount of work that, who knows? We might only be waiting 2 or 3 months for Mortal Empires anyway, but would be incredible to have access to Lizardmen, Vampire Coast, Dwarfs Empire in at least a modded capacity for Warhammer 3. That's one that I'm looking forward to if people are able to figure out how to do that. Obviously, Mixu stuff. I think he already made an Egrim von Horseman Legendary Lord that it looks incredible. And there's a lot of stuff that people are going to be able to do. And from what I've heard, the modding scene for Warhammer 3 is super robust. Like, there's a bunch of tools that did not exist in Game 1 and Game 2 that are available in Game 3. And obviously stuff like the Demon Prince mechanic, being able to create your own. Like, those will be the blueprint that modders can use and push that to its limit. I'm very excited for modding Warhammer 3. And you guys know how much I loved it in the first 2 games, but I think it's going to be an even bigger deal in the capstone game of this trilogy. And I think this will, even if CA never did anything ever again, as long as they give modders modding tools, we'd still get a ton of time left on this game. So I'm very excited. Moving forward, it's all about stability, performance, and then I guess future stuff, DLC, and all that. Let me take a drink of water because my throat's getting scratchy. H2O, baby. Love it. Gotta love it. Should I leave that in or should I edit that out? Was that attractive? Are you attracted to me now? Should I lather up my loins as we get ready for the closing out of this video? Yeah, I'll probably just leave it in. And some of you will get mad at me, but that's okay. As I said, it's going to be relaxed. So, general thoughts. I think it's addressing a lot of the core problems people have with Warhammer 3 at the moment. It's a good start. It does not address everything. There's still plenty of problems with the game, and even some of the things they said they are addressing here may not be fully fixed by this update. But for a first patch, especially one that we had to wait a pretty goddamn long time for, the game came out in February. It's going to be early April when we get this first major balance update. I don't know exactly how I feel about that, but generally I don't like having to wait that long for major changes. But if you're going to package it all in one package together, okay, I guess it's kind of logical. Make sure that everything is ironed out. Make sure this first patch hits all the major notes and is smooth. I saw a patch in Hunt Showdown that got pushed way too early, and it caused a bunch more problems than it fixed. So, and that happened only like a couple days ago. So hopefully that won't happen here. Hopefully that they're taking that extra time and utilizing that to its fullest potential. Generally speaking, for future content, DLC, obviously their whole schedule has been changed by the release not being as good as they wanted it to be, not being as good as the community wanted it to be. Things probably got pushed back a little bit. Again, while I'm expecting Immortal Empires to not come for 5 or 6 months at the least, I think. Although there are a bunch of reasons why I think that will be a long wait. But I'm okay with not knowing about DLC or Blood Pack right now. I think it's smart for CA to not talk about those things yet until they make sure this patch is good, that everyone's in a better situation, that people are happier with the base product. And then after early April, we can get that roadmap and look towards the future. And I'm very much looking forward to that as well. So, if you guys enjoyed this look at the patch notes, I will see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.